friends. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 195 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 16th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. This past Sunday, we resumed what I have now discovered is one of my favorite weekend activities, and that is the Boss Librarian and Friends Clubhouse Chat led by Casey Boyd. And friends, I'm so excited because when the school year gets started, I knew that we would be resuming our chats on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, this is really fantastic. If you've never participated in Clubhouse, this is an opportunity. It is a group chat. It is a live chat, which is also recorded, but it is done through a phone app, and it's entirely audio. There is no video whatsoever. And it really is a fantastic opportunity, very informal, very casual, and an opportunity to all get together and talk. And this is a really fun opportunity. I'll tell you, our next get together is going to be Sunday, October 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is a great way to get your head sort of back into thinking about your upcoming week. Everyone is welcome to post in the room chat, or you can raise your hand and contribute to the conversation. But there are also people who join the room, the Clubhouse chat, and also just are involved in listening to the conversation and enjoying. And friends, I encourage you to participate and join us, because it really is a wonderful way to start your week. If you're not familiar with Clubhouse, you need to download the app and then look for Boss Librarian and Friends in the search, and you can set reminders so that when we are getting the room open and going, that you are given a little alert. And it really is a wonderful way to spend some time listening and talking with other school librarians. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on Twitter, my handle is at LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our official sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning Pebble Go research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. And now in a segment I like to call Why I Love Capstone. Friends, today we are going to focus on the titles which are all in Spanish. And I find it incredibly timely because many of us, our budgets have just been open to us at the beginning of the school year. We've got the whole year ahead of us, and it's entirely possible that you would like to build a bilingual collection. You'd like to offer titles, in this case, in Spanish. And I wanted to let you know what Capstone has to offer. I've included a link in our show notes to the collection of Spanish titles. And in this case, we're talking about 1,300 titles. And it's really fun because you can search by all sorts of filters. And in this case, we've got 1,330 titles. And when you search, you can use a guided reading level. You can also search by the actual format. So in this case, most of these books are paperback. There are some interactive ebooks as well as big books. You can also sort by grade level, which is really fun because in this case, when you sort by grade level, you can also see numerically that the bulk of these books are written at the K1-2 sort of interest level, but they give you a way to filter those. And you also can see that you've got 400 653 fiction titles, 877 nonfiction titles. And the other fun thing is you can also see by copyright how recent these books are. And I love looking at how the genres are spread out. You've got almost 40 fairy tales and fables. You've got 20 graphic novels in Spanish, 380, which are informational text. You've got then realistic fiction, and you've got some sports fiction. You've also got adventures and humor, but it's fun to see it all broken down that way. And I'm very grateful because I know that we all have limited budgets. We all have a certain amount of money that we can allocate to different areas of our collection and ones that we want to be intentional about building out. And I'm grateful because in this case, you can hone in very specifically on the titles that would best suit the needs and the interests of your readers. So very, very grateful. Thank you so much. Capstone has made it easy for us to spend money. And I have no doubt that if you're looking to build out your collection of titles in Spanish, that this is a very easy and user-friendly way to do so. I am so grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 5. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Accelerated Reader, and my conversation with Aubrey Simons and Lauren Pish. Aubrey Simons, Lauren Pish, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Hi.
I'm hoping you can describe where in the country you work, your current library. Tell us a little bit about your grades, your programs. Tell us about your teaching schedule or clubs you offer. Aubrey, let's have you go first.
I am the K-5 librarian in an elementary school in Central Texas. We have a large bilingual population, about at least one bilingual teacher per grade. I am on a fixed and flex schedule that I thankfully get to create myself. My administrator is really supportive of that. And this is my second year as a librarian, and I've been loving it so far.
That sounds fantastic. I have to think a long time ago to my second year. Now, Aubrey, before we introduce Lauren, you did ask if Lauren could join us for this conversation. How is it you two know each other?
I think that we found each other on Twitter. When I first started, I was looking for everybody that I could follow, and Lauren lives pretty close to my area, so I was following her pretty closely on Twitter, and then I reached out because she does some pretty cool things, and she is always willing to share, and she's so nice and supportive that we had just talked about a few things, and I thought about this podcast whenever I had this question that I brought to you.
Fantastic. So Lauren, let's hear about you. Same thing. Tell us about typical day, your school, what's your day like, your schedule, and the grades you support.
So my school is very similar to Aubrey's. I work in a smaller school district in Central Texas. We're K-5. We have about 460 students. I've been a librarian this is my 9th year. I have both a fixed and flex schedule that I get to create myself. I see about 25 classes each week. So my school is not a large bilingual school. We have certain schools in our district that are, but mine is not. So, and thank you, Aubrey, for all the sweet comments that you made.
Well, and I think that when we find people who are willing to share, that's really what makes that builds that relationship, because allow ourselves to become vulnerable and ask for help. And we find that when somebody is willing to share, it is a way that we can, both become better librarians. So, for the benefit of listeners outside of the United States, because I don't know how prevalent accelerated reader is outside of the United States. I truly don't. I've included a link to AR in our show notes, but would any of you like to give us an idea of what AR entails in general? How about we pick on Lauren? Because Lauren, I think, has probably been at this for a little bit longer.
I was in the classroom when I started with AR. So I am quite familiar with it. And then as a librarian, I've used AR. AR is Accelerated Reader. It is a reading program where students take a test and they get a reading level, and then they pick out books based on their reading level. Teachers set goals for them, point goals. They also have a percentage goal that like 85% passing. You promote reading 20 minutes every night, and then they take a test on their books, and then you kind of have discussions with your students whether or not, if they are failing tests, you can have discussions with them versus like maybe we need to try a different reading level or what, have just those great conversations about what they're reading. And so it's a great program.
Well, and I'm curious. So, Lauren, what is the current status of AR in your library right now?
We do not use AR any longer. This has been our second full year. No, third full year. Sorry. Third full year without AR. I'm like, it's like one of those post-AR worlds. When did we do that? So yes. So we do not do AR anymore. We don't use it.
Well, and I'm curious just because I haven't talked to somebody who used AR and no longer does, but did you undo the labeling on your books, or are your books still labeled for AR?
They are still labeled for AR. I did not go back I have about 15,000 books in our library. I was not going to do that. Now, I still get the AR labels when I process books on the outside, just to kind of help with reading levels with students. But no, I did not go undo. Now, we did also have a dot system with our AR books, so I would know what their levels were. I do not put the dots on my books anymore, but that was something I had to do personally anyway when we got a new shipment of books in. So nope, that I do not do.
I'm just curious, can your students tell what reading level the books are from the outside, or do they have to open the book up?
So yes, I have some books, my newer books, that they do have an AR label on the outside as well as the inside. But my older books only have an AR label on the inside, even though they still do have their dot color. So they could but I don't have a dot color chart on my walls anymore. So if they weren't here, back years prior, if they're kinder or first or second grade, they don't really understand what the dot colors mean. They just think, oh, that has a purple pretty dot on it. So,
well, that was my next question. Are students still picking out books based on their AR, sort of where they last were?
No. In the last couple of years, I did have students who would be like, well, last year I was a lime green dot. And I would just be like, well, that's kind of we can use that as a starting point and a helpful tool to help you judge maybe what books you should start with, but we're not going by dot colors anymore. So you can pick, but we focus more on them opening up the book and trying to read it and finding a just right book versus looking at the dot color. Now, of course, whenever I have a kindergartner that picks up a green dot, which is either a 4th, 5th, or 6th grade level dot. I'm like, okay, well, let's try to read it. It's a helpful tool to me to go, okay, let's see if you can read this.
And I love that, Aubrey, you're here for contrast because you're in a very different place in your library.
I am. However, we also don't have that dot labeling system, or for most of our books, we don't have the reading level on the outside. So we get those, we'll have kids that come in that say, I need a 3rd grade book. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you have to just look through the books in the library, and we go to the shelves and I, show them about finding that just right book. You have to read some of it, see how far you can get through without missing, how many words their teacher tells them. But we don't label the books.
So does that mean, in theory, your students could pick any book to take a test on?
Yes, in theory, they could. Generally, because their teachers come with them to the library, usually the teachers will help them make sure that they're picking at least one of their books in a reading level to use in the classroom. But yeah, they could pick whichever book they want.
So now I have to ask a follow-up question. Your teachers join their class for library? That's our release time. This is completely like my job as an elementary librarian would have been so different if the teacher had stayed in the room.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. Our teachers are awesome. They like to come in with their kids and see what they're reading and help them pick out books.
Okay, I have to know, when is their planning time then?
Well, I'm not in the specials rotation.
Okay, it all makes sense now. All right, now I get it. Once in an albeit very rare library Facebook post, I'll read of a school librarian being asked about what should happen with AR moving forward in their school. Have either of you ever had a say in what happens to AR in your school? And let's start with Aubrey.
No, I have not been asked my opinions about AR. However, I have spoken with my administration, and we kind of have similar ideas about it. So I kind of have a little bit of leeway to figure out the level of, what is the word I'm looking for? Of maybe fidelity that we use.
And how about you, Lauren? Have you been able to voice your opinion when it comes to what the place AR plays in your school and no longer does?
At the school level, yes, my principals were always very open to, whatever I thought was best for the library type of thought. And then at a district level, our supervisor, we had several conversations with the other librarians. There's 11 of us total. So we had a lot of conversations about whether we thought that, AR was effective. And we had talked with our supervisor. He went to our administration at central office and kind of had voiced his opinion. And whereas, we weren't quite ready when we got the news that they were not going to renew our AR. It was kind of shocking. We all kind of had that deer in the headlights look when they said, oh yeah, we're not going to have AR anymore. And we were like, what? We hadn't really decided yes or no. We kind of felt like put on the spot because we had thought we maybe had one more year to come up with what we were going to do in its place. And this was all happening during COVID. So we were at home and they came back the summer before that 2020 school year started. And we're like, yes, we are going to get rid of AR. So y'all come up with something else. You'll have about a month to get it done. So it was a shock, but
I am so curious because your reaction is not one I expected. my impression of AR is that it takes you away from other things you could be doing. And it takes up your time because it is additional steps in your book processing. And yet you were caught off guard. And it sounds like you're almost annoyed.
So at the time, I was one of the librarians that wasn't quite sure if I really wanted to get rid of it because, yes, there is a lot of extra work that goes into AR and there's a lot of monitoring. And I mean, I was running reports left and right, but it also was a way for us to monitor that children were actually reading. And so my whole thing was, how are we going to make sure that children are still really and truly reading their library books? And whereas I wanted something different, I wasn't ready right then for them to say, drop it, and for us to start something brand new, especially because we were going into a school year that was going to be unlike anything we had ever had before. And I was like, can't we just keep this one thing that we already know how to do and we can just do it for one more year until we figure out what we really are going to do next? But it was okay.
Lauren, I'm dying to know, before the end of this conversation ends, I do want to know how you solved that question. And not right now, but before we leave this episode, please make sure we know, how did you reconcile that? Because it sounds like there's a vacuum and you wanted to create something in AR's place. So let's talk to Aubrey. Friends, the success of AR is wholly dependent on the culture of the building, how supportive the teachers are and how the willingness of students to go along with this format and the administrators' commitment to fund this program. So Aubrey, why is AR still going strong?
So I thought about this question and the best way to answer it. I think, honestly, for my district, it's about data. So we're big on data. And this is a way to measure whether it's accurate or not, if kids are reading and if possibly they are understanding what they're reading. So they can look at word count, which is big in our district. They can look at that average percentage correct, and have a concrete number to associate.
Wow. And Lauren, did your district just decide you don't need that data from AR, or there's another way to determine that data?
So, yes, our district kind of decided that maybe some of the data wasn't quite correct when it came to AR, and we also use another program called iStation. So they were using our iStation data, and there were some overlapping similarities in reading level and where iStation said that students were and where AR said there were some differences, but there were things that lined up the same. So they in AR, it's an expensive program. So they decided to go ahead and stick with iStation and instead of renewing our accelerated reader subscription.
And so do you think that's the primary reason why AR was removed and the iStation was put in its place?
So another thing with AR is that you definitely have to have full buy-in from all stakeholders, not just your librarian. Your teachers have to do it with fidelity. Your administrators have to, support you. And we did have some schools in our district that weren't doing it at all. Their principal said, no, they weren't going to do it. They didn't like AR and they weren't going to do it. And then we did have some administrators that would use students not making their weekly percent goal. So we had at the end of every week, students should be at this percent of their point goal. And we did have some administrators who would take away recess time if some students were not at their percent goal. So we had kind of both ends of the spectrum. I luckily was at a school that my principal kind of was like, you do what you need to do. And we were not ones that took away recess because I don't believe in that. And I was not as harsh as others and strict with it. I was a little bit more lenient. If they had a reading level if they wanted to read something that was above or below their reading level, I would let them read it because I didn't want to squash their love of reading by limiting what level they were reading. And even though I did have some teachers who would say, no, you can only get this level, and they would come to me and they would say, but I really want to read this book. And I would say, well, you know what? You just tell her that I said you could get it, because I was like...
So I'm curious, Lauren, did you have the teachers in the library visit with their classes, or they were dropped off?
So for the majority, our teachers would stay. K1, 2 at that time would stay with their classes. Now, at that time, my 3, 4, 5 classes, they kind of just would send kids whenever. They didn't necessarily have a fixed time that they came. They did have a time, but they didn't always use it just because, star grades and all those are pretty, they're just so busy with teaching. But now, yes, all my, K through 5, my teachers stay with their classes when they're in the library. So they get to hear everything that I say.
So I do want to just throw this question out. At some point, I want to know how much AR costs. And if either of you happen to know if it's a per pupil or if it's a site license. But if we can just think about that during this conversation. So Aubrey, I want to go back to you for a minute. What could end AR in your building? Because we talk about all these stakeholders being invested and buying into this platform. Right now, you say data is what's driving the need to do this. But what would really crack that, the support if somebody decided we weren't going to do AR anymore?
I think it would have to be pretty unified, an effort between librarians, teachers, and admin, because I think pretty high up in our district, it has a lot of buy-in. So it would really have to get a strong base among, everybody, the stakeholders and the schools themselves before there was any change made.
Curious. I'm now wondering if the program at Lauren's school, the iStation, might find its way over into Aubrey's school. And Aubrey, you already know?
We have iStation.
You have both.
We do, but we don't use the AR, the STAR reading to do the assessment for levels. We only use STAR Math. And then we do the testing. A compromise. What this boils down to is our job is to support building initiatives, regardless if we support them or not. You can object to on principle, but your job is to be a team player, not to impede or sabotage your school's efforts, right? I'd love to hear what both of you think. Did you aid and abet, or did you thwart the AR in your program? Let's start with Lauren.
At the end of the day, I want my students reading, and I want them to develop a love for reading and books. But if AR or whatever program is what my administration is telling me that that's what they want me to use. Of course, that's what I'm going to use. But I also, on the side, always kind of had my own reading incentives going on, different than just AR. Even when we had AR, I also would do a monthly themed reading challenge, just to kind of offset and do our own thing, which kind of led into what we do now. But no, I would definitely, if that's what was pushed down the pipes to me, that's what I'm gonna do.
Got it. How about you, Aubrey?
I think Lauren said it really well. I have developing opinions on AR, but like Lauren, I want my kids to love reading, and I think that is the end goal for me. So there are ways that I can get them excited about reading with AR, and there's a bunch of kids who have said, like, this is the best, I love reading now. On the other hand, there are kids that just will not take a test because they don't want to, but that doesn't mean they're not readers, and it doesn't mean that they're not reading. It's just they're choosing to do it another way. So I think it's important that we don't do things like take away their recess if they are not meeting those goals, but to make it more of a positive and supportive tool rather than a punitive one.
I don't disagree. Aubrey, I'd like to make sure this conversation stays positive and productive. What, in your honest opinion, needs to happen to make AR a successful program implemented in your building?
So first of all, I think it should be just one piece of the puzzle. I think that, like Lauren does with the reading challenges, you need to bring other things in rather than have AR be the sole thing that you focus everything on. It does need that support from teachers and administration, but it should be fun, and it should be something that the kids can do without making them feel bad, or hopefully do and, be excited about goals that they've met.
I'm wondering, because the students are encouraged to read at grade level, do they also get a fun book that they get to check out? So in addition to the one they're going to be taking an assessment on, in my opinion, it would be easy if you would just say, well, this is the one you're going to take a test on, and this is the one that you're going to read, dare I say, for fun? Aubrey? Yeah. Is that what you do?
Yeah, we do that. Mm-hmm. And I'm very bad about, well, I don't know if it's bad or not, but if I have a kid that comes in that they have to get books in their reading level, our max is 2 for checkout. I'll let them check out another one. And we have some kids whose reading level is in the 1st or 2nd grade, and so they're getting the small books, but they're reading them and then taking their test, and then they're coming back 3-4 times a day. So, yeah, so
that's wonderful.
Sometimes I'll be like, here, take 4 books.
That's a good problem to have. That's not a problem. That's a victory. Some of this is really hitting home for me because I don't teach elementary anymore. And I briefly taught AR, but it was in my situation, the buy-in by the teachers was 0. And so the administrators said, we're not going to pay for AR anymore, and nobody cared. So it's hard because for me, my experience is very different from yours. Lauren, I am curious, can you give advice to Aubrey and to listeners who are supporting AR in their building-wide or a district-wide initiative? Do you have some inspiring strategies or some programming suggestions that librarians like Aubrey could use to really benefit from all the supports that are there with an AR program?
My main advice that I have for anyone currently using AR is to just make sure that all stakeholders support it, and don't be afraid to explain to your admin how it works or what it entails, and have trainings with your teachers, because not just your new teachers, your veteran teachers also, because sometimes they tend to forget those particulars that they need to be doing when it comes to AR, like having conversations with their students about what they're reading and monitoring. And then just like Aubrey did, my students, they would have to pick, if they got 3 books, they would pick 2 that were in their reading range, and then they would get one that we would call a free choice. And it could be anything. And just, I didn't want to, we did AR, I didn't want to live by their level. I didn't, want to feel like I was holding them back from something that they really and truly wanted to read. And then, because who knows, maybe they're going to go home and they're going to read it with their parents. Their parents are going to help them. They're going to sit and read it together as a family. And then also just, recognizing students we would recognize students for point clubs. If they made million-word reader, at the end of the year, we did an AR store where kids bought things with their AR points that they had earned for the whole year. So, just having those little incentives that really boost their reading morale. So,
got it. So, Aubrey, does any of this connect with the kinds of things that are working in your current program?
Absolutely. And like I mentioned before, it was the monthly reading challenges, I think, that I first reached out to Lauren about, because I wanted something to supplement, I guess, what we were doing with AR, and that's one of the things that we picked. But we also have million-word readers. We do AR goal parties, so no matter what the kid's goal is, if they meet it, they get to come to these parties that we have. We also have a word count wall. That's our big focus isn't on points, it's on word count. So the kids get really excited because we do, different kind of fun things with it. Last year it was Mario, and I took pictures of them and put their little heads on a Mario, and then he moved through the levels. And this year it's Pokemon. They're going to earn gym badges, so it's exciting. It's fun.
I'm hoping would it be possible to include some pictures in the show notes? Any sort of some images that you could maybe share with us, that would be fantastic.
Yes, I can do that. I'll send you some.
Friends, we'll put those in the show notes. I think that we have to recognize that when a school district is AR, it is going to consume a considerable amount of our energy, but it doesn't have to define our entire program. So, Lauren, life after AR, what has filled the place of AR? How have you created an accountability or a substitution? And now that you're in a post-AR school, is there something of a vacuum? What have you done to fill that space? I know you mentioned iStation, but I imagine that you found other ways to build up your library program.
Yes. So iStation really isn't our library program. It's just another tool that our teachers and admin use to track data. They gave us the news that we weren't going to have AR anymore. All the librarians got together and we're like, what are we going to do? So we had come up with a library quest that it focused on different skills, mostly reading skills, some library skills. We also had to make it seesaw friendly because a quarter of our students were remotely learning. So they needed some kind of platform to complete these reading challenges in. And we kind of realized, because it was a 9 weeks thing, that it was a little bit too long. By the time they hit kind of the second month, they had kind of forgotten about it. So then mid-year, we swapped and started doing a monthly bingo challenge, and they could earn points for their classroom. based on the activities that they completed on their bingo challenge. And then we would reward their classes. The class that had the most points would get the reward. We even rewarded the teachers. We would bring them coffee if their class won, or tacos if their class won. So it was a little incentive for the teachers to promote it also, since it was something that was new. And then last school year, we started what we call brag tag bingo. We ordered some brag tags from School Life, and we kept our same 9-square bingo board, and we had different activities that went along with the month. So, for example, like October, the students do they decorate a pumpkin like a book character, and that was one of their squares on their bingo board that they could earn a brag tag for. And then whenever they got 3 in a row, they would earn a brag tag, and they still were earning points for their class. But one thing we did notice was we would have some classes that would have a lot more points than others, or we would have some classes that, 5 or 6 kids were doing the entire thing and no one else was doing anything. And then they were all being rewarded with cookies or whatever we were giving them that month. And so this year we switched gears again, and it is more of an individual reward. So now if they black out their bingo card, then they will come to the monthly reward party of whatever we're doing, giving as a incentive that month. And so, it's just kind of evolved over the last 3 years. We trial and error what works and what doesn't. And the only thing is there isn't a way to track whether or not they're reading. That was the positive about AR, that you could actually tell what they were reading and if they were understanding what they were reading. And I'm not going to, go through 460 students' reading logs to make sure that what they are writing down for their summary is correct based on what they read. So that is probably the part that has been the hardest for me, is not being able to check that they are actually reading.
Appreciate is that your building realized the need to evolve when these programs post AR were sort of growing and seeing which ones resonated with students, which ones were more successful than others. And so I think that I appreciate that your building recognizes the need to reevaluate these programs as you go through the year. And that in some cases, programs that are too long are, depending on our students' age, they can't maintain that momentum. What about you, Aubrey? You're heading into year 2 of AR. How is this year, do you think, going to be different from last year?
That's a good question. I think last year I was just kind of throwing anything I could out there to see what would stick. And this year I have just a better understanding of what things the kids will do, which things they like, which things the teachers like and don't like. So I feel like I'm more laser focused this year on really building on those programs and incentives that the kids did enjoy and were successful with.
Ooh, can you share? What were some things that the kids really liked, and what were the incentives that they really enjoyed?
So they really liked the word count wall and getting their little faces on the Mario. So like I said, we kind of changed that up this year. And they'll still have their face up on the board, but they're earning gym badges for the number of words that they get to. I also just decided yesterday that I'm going to dress up as Pikachu and go through the classrooms and hand out certificates for their gym badges. So yeah, just trying to make it fun.
Friends, I mentioned I worked in a school which briefly had AR. This would have been my first and second year of being a school librarian. And At one point, we were paying per test. So for us, we only paid for the books that had tests on them. And we had to, once we owned those tests, we didn't have to pay any more money to AR. And they almost immediately changed that platform to a sort of subscription fee that would apply and you'd get all the tests. Well, that number, and this would have been, I want to say about 16 years ago, that number was over $6,000 per year. And my district said, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And the districts that said yes were ones that were Title I, and they could use Title I funds. And so that decision was made for us. We're not going to be spending $6,000 on a program nobody cares about. And AR died a quiet death. But Lauren, you seem to have an idea. You've sort of crowdsourced this answer. Lauren, tell us, what have you learned about AR funding? Because I'm sure that there are people who are curious because their school either does have AR or doesn't have AR, but we sure would like to know how much this costs.
So we are also a Title I school. So I'm not sure which funds pay for what, but our license was per campus, and so there were about, 9 campuses using AR at one time, and I believe our subscription price ranged anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 somewhere in there, and we also the last year had a Myon with our AR subscription. We still have Myon, but no longer have AR.
Wow. All right. And that definitely does help. And there's something that's curious. So you mentioned word count, and I know that there are librarians who run contests about how many words a student reads. I will claim ignorance. How does one do this if you're not an AR school? And Aubrey, you're smiling. Can you help me out? Do you know anything about tracking word count if you don't have AR?
I guess you could go to ARbookfinder.com because it lists the levels, it lists the word count of books that it has in its database. I'll look that up sometimes whenever a kid asks.
Because I know that there are librarians who do word count competitions and they are not AR. And the idea of finding out how many words a book has, I'm sure there's a way to do it. Lauren, you're nodding your head.
Yes, what Aubrey said. So even afterwards, I had a couple of parents that they still wanted their student to be a 1,000,000-word reader or more because their sibling was. So I still, even last year, had a 1,000,000-word reader because they tracked everything that she read and they looked it up on ARbookfinder and would write down, kept track of her word count, and would turn in, 25 pages of reading logs with their word count all totaled up. So, so yes, that is how you can track it.
Well, and so ARbookfinder, we'll put a link in the show notes. Friends, you obviously don't need a subscription. It's just a website and you can look up the word count for books. It just seems like an accounting nightmare. You're just keeping track of how many, just adding. You have like a Google sheet going and keeping track of all those, or does AR do that for you? Yes, Aubrey.
So we were talking about this because our middle and high school does not use AR, I'm sorry, that's not true. Our high school doesn't. But when we were talking about 1,000,000-word reader, the district wants to do like a dinner at the end of the year. And so our high school librarian was wondering how she could push this out to her high schoolers. And so she was thinking about doing a bingo so she would know how many words just a set amount of books had. And then the kids could choose from those if they wanted to be million-word readers.
Wow. That'd be really interesting to find out. And I don't know if I've read a million words. I know I sure have listened to them on my audiobooks. Well, I got to tell you, Lauren and Aubrey, as we move forward, what advice would each of you give to somebody who they just started at an AR school and they want to be successful and they don't know where to start? Lauren, can you give us some advice? And then Aubrey, I'll let you have the last say.
So I would start with just keeping it really simple until you're familiar with the program, and having those conversations with teachers about, making sure that they are also keeping track. It can't just be a one-man show. You can't do everything on your own. You can run all the reports in the world, but if you don't have teacher buy-in and they're not promoting it, they're the ones that are with the kids, 8 hours a day. So it's not going to work if it's just you. So just really trying to make sure that your teachers are, using it with fidelity and making sure admin understands what exactly the program takes, because yes, it is a lot of work that you have to do. And I would sometimes be sitting at my computer running reports or looking at data, and my principal would come by and I felt like I needed to explain, like, I'm sitting here running reports, like I'm not doing nothing, like you feel like you got to say it because you don't want them to think that, well, what is she doing? So just making sure that teachers understand it is not just the librarian having to do all the work on her own.
Got it. How about you, Aubrey? You've made it through your first year. What advice would you give to first year you, if you could?
I would agree about teacher support. I think that is key. And even if you don't have teachers that are 100% on the AR wagon, as long as they're having conversations with kids about books, I think that is beneficial to the program and just to kids in general. So having the teacher support, admin support, and don't expect to be able to do it all that first time around. Just try and have fun with it if you have to do it.
Lauren and Aubrey, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk with us. Let us know how we can follow you on social media. Lauren, how about you first?
So my Twitter handle is @LaurenBPish. And then I also have an Instagram that I just started, so it doesn't have a lot of content, but it's Lauren_in_the_library.
Excellent. And how about you, Aubrey?
So my Twitter handle is @AubSimons, and Twitter is where I'm most active, but I also have not recently started, but I have an Instagram that has been sitting there for a long time that I decided I was going to try and start using again. And that one is just @Mrs. Simons Reads.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, I hope you have a fantastic fall, and we're moving into our Halloween season, and I'm sure you have some fun things planned for your students. I wish you a fantastic school year.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Friends, you can well imagine the challenge of getting two guests together during the school year for all of us to share a conversation, in this case, on Accelerated Reader. I'm so grateful to Aubrey and to Lauren for taking time out of their busy schedules. Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. One last friendly reminder, friends, I encourage you to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 off an order of $100 or more using the code UNITED. The topic of our next episode will be community connections and my conversation with Natalie Daly. I hope you will tune in.